And the question I want to start off with is, what is going on with men and why are men struggling? So there's a lot going on. Since the 1970s, male participation in the labor force has dropped from 80% to 69%, so a pretty sharp decline. In terms of educational attainment, men are losing out to women at every level from kindergarten through PhD. Men's mental illness is on the rise, addiction's on the rise, suicide's on the rise. What is going on with men right now? Anybody can start. Porn. Oh, that's a good one. Right out the
Right out the gate. Let's do this. Right? That's how we do the things here. I think that there's a lot of answers to the question of like what's going on with men. I jump right out the gate and I say porn because it's so easily overlooked, but I think that if you really look at the implications of what consistent high potency porn does to a man in their developing years, the way that it exists now, I think that it is not only maybe like the largest contributor to male mental health struggles, but also I think that it is often overlooked. And so that's why I jump right out and I'm like, let's talk about porn because, a lot of people don't want to talk about it because of all different types of discomforts around talking about it, ranging from they don't want to disapprove of it all the way to the other end where it's like, well, it's a sin and you shouldn't be doing it anyway, and everything in between. And I just think that we got to do better for our guys and talk about the fact that it's not just a guy normal thing to watch hours of porn and go through crazy amounts of fetishes and run your brain through all that over and over and over again and then be like, how come you're not starting a family? How come you can't keep a job?
What is one thing that we're not talking about enough that we should talk about more?
Wow, so many different thoughts. Pornography is one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, pornography. I think it's the elephant in the room for a lot of conversations that people are having. Gosh, don't even get me started. I could talk about this one at length, but it plays a large role in the alienation of women from men and men from women, and creates an underclass and a invitation into secrecy and compartmentalization on the one hand.
Oh, easy porn.
Wow. Okay, I've had a couple people say porn. Tell me more about that.
It's number one.
And you're a marriage and family therapist, so that's even more interesting.
Well, yeah, it's my primary clientele is related to this issue. So, porn has completely changed everything because we become observers. Okay, like completely observers, and to the point where I have many clients at 20 with erectile dysfunction, right? One of my hypotheses, like in Pornhub, one of the top categories has now become transgender. That was not the top. It used to be always like incest, step dad stuff. That's always kind of stayed at the top. But what has happened now, if you think about our parents, like my dad or whatever, he ejaculated to looking at a picture of a female. So he got off 1,000 times to boobs and a vagina. So now we have kids who have gotten off 10,000 times to seeing a penis and a vagina. So now I don't get off anymore if I don't see both of those things. So number one is they have to have sex where they're watching themselves. So the observer, the BDSM is very observer, not connected. Observer self, they don't even know what it feels like. Like the actual feeling of a vagina is very terrifying to them because it's desensitized. They're completely desensitized. Women and young girls, I mean, a lot of this gender dysphoria is they're rejecting their being a sexual prey. I mean, kids are so scared of arousal that they think that is something you don't, I don't want to be aroused. So I think a lot of even the bisexual tendencies are coming from men are arousing me. Anxiety's bad instead of realizing anxiety's excitement. It looks the same way under an MRI machine.
Well, I think we got to be talking about porn. How we talk about it and when we talk about it definitely matters because we don't need to be talking about it all day. And we don't need to be talking about it with all ages and all populations at all times. But we need to have the courage to talk about it directly, not beat around the bush, not make it out to be like it's something that some people have. And, if you have that problem, let's talk on the side. If we are in a room full of men,
we can assume that whatever high percentage of them have had negative consequences from porn, and they would benefit from a conversation that included honesty about porn. So, I mean, that's the one that comes to mind. But I will say this, though, is that I'm more inclined to answer the question by saying that we need to stop talking about serious things all the time, because that seems like that's all we're doing. And that's part of the reason why I do comedy in my therapy. And that's part of the reason why I take serious conversations and I turn them into joking conversations, because I think we're always trying to find this deep topic to talk about. And sometimes we have to sit together and just be like, ha, 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 life is funny. Don't you think this is a good cigar? Yes, I do. Like, it doesn't have to be this crazy exchange of ideas all the time. And I think that we can calm down a little bit on all sides of it.
I like that. It's almost like giving people permission to relax.
Yes.
Because it almost feels like you have a moral duty to be uptight a little bit. You know what I mean?
But it also, I mean, if you just study the effects of porn on the brain, it lessens empathy. Users have less empathy towards others. They're less attracted to in-person partners, so they're less able to connect properly with a loved one in terms of physical intimacy and romance. It causes all kinds of physical issues, impotence and erectile dysfunction, and it alienates men and women from each other. Not to mention the fact that on average, kids are exposed to porn in the United States at about age 9 now. So
9?
you think about, and that's not like looking at a picture in Playboy of a woman's breasts. That's hardcore pornography that kids are exposed to with multiple partners and violence and things like that. So if you have little kids who are seeing images like that from way before they've developed their own kind of sexual self-concept and even held a hand, or kissed somebody, your introduction to sex and sexuality is through pornography. I think it's an incredibly dangerous force and it also makes up, it's at least a third of internet traffic is people looking at porn. So it's an elephant in the room. So that's one.
I'll say this, whenever I work with teenagers and we start talking about porn at some point, teenage boys, I always tell them that if I had access to porn the way you guys did, I would have been the first case of overdosing and dying from porn. Because I would have been like, okay, I guess this is the end of my life, and however many years go by, I'm watching porn, and then they would find me dead. And I tell them, I don't envy you. I really don't envy you, because it must be so difficult to be a teenage boy in this world and be, it's not even like 5 years ago. Now there's a billion devices in the house, old devices that, we haven't used, and you can get a device with internet access for like $20, and it's like, what if you were, what did you say?
From your friend at school?
Yeah, from your friend at school, from your iPad that your school has, like whatever. I mean, and there's really no way, I've accepted that there's no real way to block it at this point. I did that work for years with a lot of people, blocking their phones and things like that, which is very helpful. This is my specialty, by the way, sex and porn addiction. It's very helpful when people are trying to stop and they need a barrier, like you talk about dopamine hits, right? They need space in between, the thought and then, the action and the stimuli that is going to make them go crazy. But, growing up in today's world, when you're a 14-year-old kid who's sitting there, a 15-year-old boy, dreaming about whoever it is, like, I want to say like Jennifer Aniston. I know that they don't dream about Jennifer Aniston, but, they're sitting there dreaming about Jennifer Aniston, and they're like, what would I say to her if I could see her, right? And like our age, where we didn't have this, we had to sit in that fantasy long enough that it almost became painful that we couldn't realize that fantasy. We couldn't bring that into reality. And then that energy moves you out of your bedroom, down the block to 7-Eleven, and you're sitting there with your friends. You're like, she's hot. I would go to talk to her. Like, and it moves you to a place where you're like, I want this thing, and there's a drive for it, and now I'm going to go act on it, right? Now, somebody thinks about Jennifer Aniston, and they Google Jennifer Aniston naked, and then they get midget porn on a bridge with Fruit Loops and 3 dudes that look like Jennifer Aniston. And And that's their introduction to sexuality. And their brain is like, we're freaking out about this, but we're also aroused by this. So I don't know. I don't know. And then they just go back to it over and over again. And their arousal template becomes formed in a way that anytime they have that urge, they're like, why would I go to 7-Eleven for sex?
It's not a new thing for middle-aged males who actually are kind of gender typical to want to transform themselves into women. Now, it's probably not talked about. And I think, nowadays, because gender is just so in the air that we are all kind of breathing in, I think a lot of males who might have had a tiny molecule of that feeling are now latching onto the trans idea. So, I've seen in my practice that there are boys who there's something sexually arousing. Maybe they're like 15 or 16 and they're, a lot of them, it's interesting. They're looking at these like sexy anime characters that are like these sexy girl anime characters, and they start to kind of fall in love with the idea of them. And then they, for some reason or another, will stumble into trans content. Then they'll like order a bra on Amazon and put it on, take pictures. And I mean, there's something kind of sexy about it to them, but they wouldn't have been full-blown autogynephiles, I think, in a different generation. But because this is so normalized, I think they take this little sexual molecule of curiosity and kind of go full force with it.
What role do you think pornography plays?
I don't know. I think it plays a role in insofar as like kids come across it very young, and I think it can have an impact on their ideas about their body and about sex with other people. I think it plays a role. It's a big debate. A lot of the kind of sexologist researchers, especially the men, don't think that porn can change your sexual proclivities. They think that we just are drawn to whatever porn already matched up with our sexual proclivities. And I think it's interesting. A lot of the women in the debate say, no, I think porn can actually shape how you develop. I'm not 100% sure, but I do think that if it's not dealt with carefully, it can really derail someone's development.
But pornography 100% is low energy. If I don't need to go out there and find a mate, like, it is giving me everything that I have. The terminology, a woman can smell desperation. Yes, a woman knows when you have jerked off, and we smell it, and then we're not interested. So I just think that people don't even know, like, a man, you jerk off in the morning, you go out and find a mate, you don't have the drive that you would have had you not done that. You don't need to procreate, you're just compulsing. So people don't realize, like, sex is about being a lover. Like, I keep talking to people, it's like, it's not about getting off, it's about being a lover. And I tell people the only way you enjoy porn is if you objectify yourself, because it's not about Cindy, who is Steve's niece, who goes to school. Like, you don't need to know anything about them to get off to them. But you then have to go and have sex, which is all about you, all about them, all about what you're feeling. But most of the time in your life, 90% of the time, you get off to no stimulation, not being touched, and not having to do a darn thing, not be who you are at all, and be attractive. So it's completely screwed up, I think, attraction and drive for people to mate. Completely.
You bring up a good point about the conditioning, because a lot of my domain, and a shameless plug, I have a video series on emotional functioning, which is a topic we just don't cover in any curricula anywhere. I mean, we sort of brush up against SEL, but there's way more emphasis on the S than the E, and even when it's done poorly. So if we know well what our brain is doing in response to environment, we can therefore gain control over emotions rather than our emotions gaining control over us, and we no longer act out of impulsivity. But your point about what'd you call it, the arousal framework, arousal template. Yeah. So my experience now is that porn creates an artificial reality that never could be, and it strips away not only the intimacy, which is only begotten by vulnerability. Vulnerability has been hijacked because we've got a proxy exhibition standing in front of it. So it gives the brain something to feel, but it's not the real thing. And so we've either bailed out or leapfrogged over the vulnerability that allows us to enter into these intimate relationships. And we've rewired the adolescent and now into adulthood brain to expect something that's completely fantastical and unrealistic. So, of course, when you have an actual sexual interaction, it's going to fall short. It will absolutely fail to meet expectations. And then that leads to a disappointing relationship altogether. But to say nothing of the actual physical touching, the smells, the sounds, the discomforts, right? The navigation of the act itself. And if you're just recreating this in your bedroom or your living room or your bathroom or wherever, and you've controlled for all the environmental factors, of course your relationships are going to fail with actual human beings because you've created a completely artificial experience that then you're trying to replicate in real life. And I think that's a real danger. If anybody wants to check out the videos, they're available on the Zephyr Wellness website. Just type in emotional functioning. It's totally appropriate for anybody over the age of about 10. It's just me in front of a whiteboard diagramming things. But I think everybody needs to learn this because it not only helps navigate impulsivity, but also crisis and communication and boss-employee relationships and all sorts of stuff.
It's so accurate to describe it as like the silent killer or the elephant in the room. I know, within the church, it's all over the place and you don't want to talk about it. I'll be in these men's groups and one man will get vulnerable and say, hey, I struggle with this. And every man has struggled with it either currently or at some point.
Yeah.
And I would guess if you were to look at like the lifetime prevalence of men struggling with pornography now today, it would be close to 100%.
Close to 100.
Not necessarily
absolutely.
currently, but at some point in their life. I mean, it's almost impossible to avoid, I feel like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the men that are willing to talk about it, it's very brave of them to talk about it because it's this issue that most people want to just sort of dismiss or diminish or minimize. It's just, what is it? I mean, come on, it's just porn. But for men who have been brave enough to talk about their experiences with this, it's a demon for them. It's something that they really struggle with. It's worse than smoking. It's worse than a lot of substance use because it's so hidden and it's so easy just to go back to. And it's almost a perfect temptation for men and for many women as well. It's something that we're naturally very interested in sex and sexuality. And it is available in limitless diversity in images that we can see online. But the thing we trade in, the more we see that, the less satisfying our actual potential relationships are. We can never achieve the amount of quantity and quality of whatever we think we're ingesting virtually. But the degree to which we do that, we alienate ourselves from the ability to ever achieve anything that's of satisfying substance for us in our own lives.
I think I want to interject something about the porn thing and see if I can get some feedback. I think a lot of times we focus on you're spending this much time looking at beautiful women and therefore it kind of gets you jaded or gets you in a position where you don't appreciate the beauty of real women anymore. I think an underrated aspect of pornography is how it affects a man's personal self-esteem. Because you kind of go and you're living in this fantasy where you're so highly desirable that you get this response from women. And it's a fantasy. And you never, no matter how much like a woman loves you, you're never going to get that type of response in real life. And so it seems like you would be constantly going through life wondering like, what's wrong with me that the world is not like this it is in my fantasy. Does that make sense?
Maybe you don't get that response, Ryan. Look, what I warn my sons about, and so far it's been effective because, I've got a pretty good tech background. So while they don't have like a closed internet, I have ultimate surveillance powers over all of their search history. And just randomly, I'll go through and just dice through their search history and see if they've been looking at bad stuff. And they don't. There was a couple times with a couple of them where they started, probing, some of the perimeters of porn. But we would talk about it. It's like, hey, bring it in. Porn, guys, it's not like video games. It's not like Marvel movies. It is a weird fantasy, but that for some reason, the way porn works for a man's brain is it's like, hey, this is real. This is like how it is. Nobody watches like a Marvel movie and sees like Iron Man flying through there. It's like, dude, I can do that. I'm going to do that right now. In fact, porn can do that. Porn does that. Like a video game, it's not real. for some reason, our brains don't know that porn isn't real. We think it's real. And human bodies are pretty gross. So we bring it in. I'm like, look, you're going to make yourself into an icky freak if you keep going down this road where you're not going to be able to associate with women. One of the things that we've started kind of introducing since our boys are getting older is the cuckold factor. I don't even know if I'm saying the word right, cuckold, but it's the idea of watching it while not participating in it. That makes you into an even bigger icky freak. And my wife and I, we've got some really great women in our social circle, and we kind of freely talk about this at an age appropriate level where these women will say, I can look at a man and tell if he is a porn addict. I could just see it. I could just see it in his eyes. And my sons are like, really? And they're like, uh-huh. And I'm like, guys, really? It makes you into an icky freak. Don't do it. You're going to ruin yourself. And so, however we did it, my wife and I, our sons don't look at porn. And I know this because I can see all of their internet history across time. And so I think we need to, as therapists who are willing to engage in, what do we call it, slut shaming or whatever, that's what they would call what we're doing right now, I think. What are the strategies to keep kids or young men on the straight and true so they don't become icky freaks?
Well,
In my
I would
home,
like to, yeah.
hit it.
Yeah, no, I'd like to talk about that for a second because I basically, over the years of working with this, I've realized that kids specifically, but people in general, but kids want more out of life, and nobody wants to watch porn all day. And they're drawn to it and they do it over and over again, and they don't know how to find their way out of it. But when there's something which is exciting to them in life, and not just like exciting in like a a non-boring way, like everything is fireworks, but when something means something to them, right? Then they forego watching porn. So I teach an improv class at a boys' high school, and
like acting.
I have, what do you say?
Like acting.
Yeah, yeah.
Nice, dude. All right.
Yeah, it's awesome. They come to my class, and it's a type of school where they could just not come if they don't want to come. They come to my class, and they're not on their phones during my class. Porn still exists during that class. The reason why they're not watching porn is because their human spirit is alive when we're connecting and we're doing an activity together. And so, I think that sometimes it could just be pushing kids out the house and just being like, go experience something, like go in the woods and like just with no plan. But other times I think it's like we as dads need to model for our kids that we are active people, right? Because I think that so much of us talk about, the kids on their phones, and then we're done with our day, and then we go and sit on our phone on the couch, and we're like, shut up, daddy's relaxing, And like, I think we're teaching the wrong message, and we're contradicting ourselves. So I think it's like the core of beating porn, so to speak, or like really bringing back the male energy, is showing and teaching that life is fulfilling when you go search for what your soul needs. And I can tell you that I believe that to be true because I'm doing it, right? Like dad's doing it. And you see that all the time. And then like then they'll come to a moment where there's like, should I watch porn or should I do this thing that I love? Should I go cycling? I love cycling. And they will choose cycling, and then that will be a touchstone memory for them for the rest of their life where they can reference like, oh, maybe porn's not the best thing in the world. Actually, I'm going to try cycling again the next time I have time and access to porn.
Yeah, I think especially if we join with them in that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And that's really scary. Like imagining you see kind of how it plays out on an individual level, and then imagining that like on a societal level with, that's a lot of harm and chaos and destruction. It's a lot to take in. It's so fascinating. I'm a recovering alcoholic and drug addict, and that's my personal life. I've also spent a lot of time working in addiction treatment centers. But I've since started leading addiction recovery group at my church, and a lot of the guys are there for pornography. And I really had no clue how big of a deal it was. It was somewhat of a deal in my life that I had to wrestle with, but I didn't realize like how it is. This is a massive issue. Marriages are breaking up over it. Guys are never even starting to date because of it.
Yes.
Like I had no clue how big this deal was.
Yeah.
Like, what are you seeing?
Oh, it's massive. You're 100% right. Families are getting destroyed by this. Men and women too. It's always important to mention
that's true.
that that women struggle with porn addiction. Maybe, it's not as common, but it's those, they need they need help because there's not a lot of really good resources for women who are struggling with porn addiction. But it's rampant, and it's such a strange piece of our culture is that we don't talk about it. And I think that we don't talk about it from both ends of the spectrum, from extreme right and extreme left, is that I think that on the extreme left, it's about sexual freedom and sexual expression. And I disagree with that so much. I could go on for days about how much I disagree with that. On the extreme right, or whatever you want to call it, like conservative, or, a lot of times there's a religious taboo around it.
Around talking about it?
Yeah. I mean, it's something that you shouldn't really be doing. And we're not going to get up and give a sermon about pornography. Like, we're going to, if you have an issue, come talk to the rabbi or the pastor or whatever. But in general, it's not something that we really want to publicize and talk about. And so I think that on both of those extremes, they don't want to talk about it as an issue. And then I think there's a lot of people in the middle that don't want to talk about it, even though they're leaders of groups, because they watch it and they don't want to bring it up. They don't want to deal with it, or they don't want to challenge it for themselves, right? They don't want to go further than they've gone, meaning they watch a lot of porn, right? So I think that there's so many layers on top of why we don't talk about it. And it's a legitimate epidemic. It is sucking the life out of people and destroying families. I can't tell you how many wives I've had sitting on this couch who are bawling their eyes out because they're like, he lied to me again. And he hasn't been present in 15 years of marriage, and I don't even know who he is. And the guy is there like a total drunkard who is like completely unaware of himself, going like, listen, I wouldn't watch porn if there was dinner when I got home, or some crazy logic. And it's like, that's addict brain, man. I feel bad for those people, and I want to help.
What kind of big picture, what's the solution to this porn thing in society going forward?
So there are a lot of pieces to it, right? Because, let's say on the legislative level, there's got to be things that are done. We just had Pornhub banned in the state of Florida, which
Texas too.
Yeah, right. That's right. Which is a great thing. It's a great thing. And a lot of people were like, well, they'll just open another site. And you have to think about it as a progression, because I remember when Florida and 17 other states over a period of a few years, like 2015, 16, declared porn a public health crisis. And it officially has been declared by many states as a public health crisis. Now, in order to get a state to declare something as a public health crisis, you need to have the data to back that up. You need to have research. And so once you have that research, then you put it up to be considered in the House of Representatives. And then once it gets passed, so then it puts together a precedent for dealing with it, and maybe put some funding towards dealing with it, right? So this has been a long time coming. So the banning a site is a big deal in the larger picture of things, right? But then, not on, let's say, on an individual level, right? So individuals are, I've changed my view on this over time. We need to block it out of our devices. We do filters and such, if it's a problem. But I think at the end of the day, the more we can foster the human spirit, the more it trumps porn. It just it beats porn. I'll tell you what I mean by that. I teach improv at a high school, a boys' high school. And these boys are boys that didn't fit into the mainstream high schools, and they made this alternative high school for them. And while I'm teaching improv, very rarely are they on their phones. They're almost never on their phones. They are sometimes, and whatever, but they almost forget about their phones for a little while, right? And improv is the kind of thing where you get way more present the more you do it. You're connecting to other people, and then all of a sudden the other thing starts to kind of fade, right? And they could all be watching porn instead of coming to my class, But because we're connecting to each other and we're using our human energy and spirit, I think it's like, I'll watch porn later. And then if you have enough reasons to say I'll watch porn later, then you have a reason to live your life in a way that's not controlled by porn. And so I think about this from parents teaching their kids to live their lives, right? Like going out with them, like go rollerblading, whatever the hell it is you do, like do that with them. When you're at night and you come home and you want to veg on the couch, do that sometimes. But like they should see you being like, I'm going out tonight because me and my friends go bowling, or me and my friends we take a cooking class, or I don't know. Like if they see you living your life and you live your life with them, then they will watch porn and then they'll say, okay, that was pleasurable. I'm not gonna miss out on all the other things we do as humans.
I mean, it almost seems like an existentialist, kind of like, I think Yala might describe it that way. Like you have meaning and purpose in life, and the addiction just loses salience, loses importance, right? You have some higher meaning, and that could be like God type meaning, or it could be playing tennis with a buddy, or going bowling with friends. Like, do you have some kind of superior meaning? And I think, like, not just the porn, but even speaking more broadly, we have a crisis of meaning and purpose in this country.
Yes, we do.
It is. I mean, you look at drug addiction, pornography addiction, obsession with politics. Like all this stuff is due to a lack of core meaning and purpose.